Okay, good evening. And we're here, Stephen Rubio and myself, Phil Dellio, for the first edition of what they said in probably a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months. I'm not sure. And Stephen and I tonight will be looking at Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. And I just call it Joker too. I don't speak French. I can't say the title.
That's me. That's
Todd
me.
Todd Phillips Joker 2. Um, you can look up the actual title.
You can say do.
We could say do, and if I could say part, I could really, expand that even more. But I'll just call it Joker 2. And listen, before we begin, Stephen, I have to ask you just a general question I was thinking about. So we've done a few of these with Scott Woods, who will be in
Mhm.
this one. We've done probably even more on our own by now. Has there ever been a new film that both of us just loved, where we were just, falling over each other to say how much we each loved it?
I mean, I have to look back. I'm not sure.
I don't
You
think so.
know.
I honestly don't think so. Possibly an old one. I'm thinking that, there have been a few where we both didn't like either one of them. There have been probably the majority where we were both sort of, okay, it wasn't terrible. We watched it. Here's a few good things. And then there have been some where one of us did like it and probably the other one didn't like it as much. But, I was thinking back to Ebert and Siskel. I'm not saying we're Ebert and Siskel, but I just remember every few shows they'd be like competing, to see who loved this great film, like Goodfellas or whatever, more than the other guy. Is that a comment on film today or on us? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, uh, my frame of reference is all movies. So, like, if I watch four movies or five movies in a week, one of them is new. So I'm not. I'm comparing the new one, which might be fine, with Rio Bravo or The Passion of Joan of Arc. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm such a film expert. I'm just saying that uh, up against those classics, I usually think well, that's a pretty good movie, but I don't go overboard. Uh, there have been a couple lately that I liked okay,
Yeah,
but I mean, even saying liked okay does seem kind of like a
right. I mean, Ebert and Siskel were doing that too. They were comparing every film to every film they'd ever seen. I think probably the difference is that, for you and I to coordinate one of these, we're looking at seeing a movie at the right time. Is it streaming? How much will we have to pay?
yes.
They were seeing movies every single week. So, big difference there. And I say that in advance of the fact that I know that we won't be falling over each other tonight to say how much we loved either one of these. I think we're probably pretty close. How about we start with? I've got more notes on Megalopolis. Uh, the other is the Joker film. It's just like, what do I say about this? But how about we start with Megalopolis, okay?
Sure.
Which I actually took the trouble to see twice, only because when I saw it the first time, by the time Steve and I got this together, and I've mentioned this often, my memory's so bad that I had to go back and see it a second time. And I got in just before I think it disappeared from theaters. Um, one useful way I can approach a film like this, I've done it before, is to jot down a handful of things that I put the word good, maybe the word not terrible would be better, or the two words not terrible. And then, from there, some things I found embarrassing, a little bit about the music, and some questions I have. So let me start with three things that I have designated as good, extra large quotation marks. Actually, the first one, I really do think she is good. The British actress, Natalie Emmanuel, who I'd never seen before, as Julia, the lead female character in the film, love interest of Adam Driver. Um, I think I'm okay to say, just in this particular small space of the world, she is unbelievably gorgeous. She gives a good performance. She gives an understated performance. She's one person in the film, maybe the one person in the film, who is able to just give a straightforward performance. The other person I'm going to praise is good for reason, very different reasons, is able to give a very straightforward performance and never embarrass herself. I thought she was good.
Mhm.
And just quickly, the other two things, and then maybe you can pick up some things you like. Aubrey Plaza has gotten, a lot of praise. And believe it or not, I mentioned this on the message board. I sat there through the whole film because I don't, I try not to read a lot in advance. So
Mhm, mhm.
I probably saw at one point in a little bit that I'd read that she was in this, but I'd forgotten about it by the time the film starts. So I'm sitting there thinking, who is she? Who is she? And I thought of, oh, I should have went and refreshed my memory. At one point, I wondered if she was Naomi Watts. I thought of somebody else who actually really, I know Naomi Watts is probably a stretch, but there was somebody else I thought of. I'll check it. I'll check it when you're talking. Who, yeah, she really looks a lot like her. I wasn't thinking I was watching Aubrey Plaza. Anyway, she gives a very campy, over the top performance, has some fun, and for what she's doing, she's good, and you can at least sort of have fun with her. And the third thing I wrote was the kid who shoots Caesar, who was in the film for 10 seconds. He was very good. That's the gap that I have to go from Natalie Emmanuel and Aubrey Plaza down to the kid who's in it for 10 seconds, who pulls a gun and shoots Caesar, who is not over the top, who is kind of chilling. I don't even think it surprised me. I think I didn't know it was coming, but as soon as I saw him and the way he was acting, I said, he's about to shoot him.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the kid who shoots the funny character in Breaking Bad, the kid that's riding around on the bike and then pulls the gun on him.
Mhm.
That was genuinely surprising. This wasn't surprising, but he's good. Okay, those are my three reasons to see Megalopolis. Not twice,
Okay.
once, but
Yes.
you might
Twice.
want to see it.
I was amazed. I thought, no, that's what Phil does. But wow. Um, of those three, first Natalie Emmanuel, she's Game of Thrones is where I knew her from,
I read a little up on
and
her. Oh, yeah.
she is um, she's distractingly beautiful. There's
Very,
actors like that you just stare at them,
yeah.
and I think it's difficult for them, men or women, to get past that because we're watching, and they're trying to get across a character, and we can't help it. And in that case, I thought a lot about that. I just thought, look at her, she's gorgeous. What are you going to do?
I
Aubrey
think she
Plaza.
wanted the character.
Okay,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Aubrey Plaza can do no wrong for me, so I knew she was in it. We had just watched another Aubrey Plaza movie the week before, where once again where she was in it but wasn't the star. That happens a lot. It seems like she's not the star. The only one I've seen recent was Emily the Criminal, where she was the title character. Um, that I can't get enough of her, and I agree with you. Camp, I guess, but I just felt like she was having fun being in that movie. And I'm not sure everybody was having fun, but she was having fun. I'm a fan of Adam Driver, but I don't always think he's having fun. He's
Uh,
acting, and that's not always the same thing.
got some things to
And
say.
then, well, I'll stop there because the third one, I have no real opinion about the
I
little
wanted to
squirt guy.
know, what did you think of the kid?
Yeah, I have to
Um,
remember him.
I don't think many people will give any thought to him whatsoever. Um, okay, I was trying to look up the third actress, or second actress I thought she looked like. Um, okay, so we've exhausted what we liked about the film. Can we move on to what's not good about it? I highlighted five most embarrassing things in the film. I mean, things that
Okay,
aren't just not good, but are actually, I found embarrassing.
that's here.
So the first two are moments involving Adam Driver, his performance, and I'm not even blaming it. Like I see, I visualize Coppola saying, "No, more, more." Where Caesar, when he after getting shot, he visits John Voight, uh, Crassus, and he does this thing where he's crying out, "No, no, no." he buries his hands. He just starts screaming out, no, no, no. I don't know who he's talking to. I don't know why he felt he had to do that. I didn't get that at all. I was embarrassed. Second thing, after the night of where they reveal the fake video with him with that virgin or whatever her name is, he goes, the film drifts off into visions and fantasies. And at one point, he's having these almost epileptic seizures. He's on screen. I think it was a fantasy, and he's violently shaking. Again, it was embarrassing to watch. I don't know. I think it was supposed to communicate something about his mental state, or I know that's what it was there for, but it was ridiculous. Right off the bat, the film embarrasses itself. The opening scene in the disco, which honestly, in 2024, this is supposed to be Francis Ford Coppola's idea of decadence. I thought of Cecil B. DeMille and the Ten Commandments. I thought of the disco scene in Basic Instinct, which is supposed to be campy. Two women kiss, and when like we're supposed to be shocked, it seemed 50 years out of date.
I think with a lot of what he was up to, he was calling on film history. He was going back, like you say, it was like a Cecil B. DeMille version. It wasn't the say Babylon, which is only a couple of years ago. He was presenting an outdated version, but I'm pretty sure he did it on purpose. I'm not saying it wasn't embarrassing, but I felt like in most of the movie, what we're seeing is what he wanted us to see. So
yeah, no, I did actually. One of the things I wrote down was a bunch of film references we can talk about. So maybe it was actually an intentional reference to DeMille and not just missing the mark by 4 decades. An actor I like a lot at times is Lawrence Fishburne. I always say he was kind of ruined by those Matrix films because the character became so kind of pompous and pretentious or whatever. I think of the amazing performance he gave in Boys in the Hood as the father. I found his sonorous voiceover, having to read things that you can read yourself. I just found his narration very silly. I won't say necessarily embarrassing, but very silly. I felt bad for him having to do that.
I wasn't blaming him for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to blame
his job.
him. Yeah, he's doing his job. You're right. That's on Coppola. And the fifth thing, maybe I should have added as a question. What on earth is Dustin Hoffman doing in this film? What is that character? He wanders on like 3 times in the film. He seems to be engaged in some sort of private joke, or he seems like he's amused himself, especially the scene where is it Crassus calls him in his confidence and basically says, you got to do me this favor. And Hoffman's laughing there. And he's in the first scene off to the side, big smile on his face. It was just ridiculous. Ridiculous. Like, I guess it's so ridiculous. I should be laughing at it instead of complaining about it. Dustin Hoffman did that. Maybe his part got cut down drastically. I don't know. It's one of those many things about the film. What is this? Why is he there? What is that character about? I'm going to hand it over.
If I can go on that, not specific to Dustin Hoffman, but to all of those points, because I rather than have single out stuff, I have a major theme.
Yeah.
Which it's why I didn't like the movie, but I won't say it's why the movie stinks, just because it stunk for me. I thought of, and it's I combine the two. I really think the two movies go together. I thought of Metal Machine music. Lou Reed often did what he wanted, but in the terms of the studio saying, "Hey, you made Rock and Roll Animal, you made Walking on the Wild Side, you made Sally Can't Dance," those were hits. Go for it. And so fuck you, and he gives them Metal Machine music. That's a very Lou Reed move. Well, I'm not saying that Coppola or Todd Phillips are Lou Reed in their approach, but I do think that Coppola, he spent his own money. He's been thinking about doing this forever. uh, one of the ways in which I find this movie being analyzed by its proponents, both of them. I should cite Matthew Solar Seitz, who for the Roger Ebert website combined the two and made this point, if I don't misinterpret it, which is Francis Ford Coppola is one of the great filmmakers of all time. He should be allowed to make the movies that he wants to make. We should appreciate that he's doing that. And if they aren't big at the box office, if they aren't obviously commercial, well, there's too much of that stuff anyway these days. No, he didn't make another superhero movie. He didn't make another, you know, uh, franchise movie. He made a movie that is almost guaranteed nobody was going to like it, but he made it because he wanted to. He had to make it, and we're supposed to appreciate that and appreciate that there are filmmakers that the art is so important to them that in his case they'll put their own money in there to do it. Okay, that's very admirable. If he was standing here right now, I'd say, "Hey, dude." I mean, my cousin who used to be a grip, he worked on a few of his movies. They were crappy ones, but he got to work with Coppola, so who's going to complain? The thing is, you already mentioned a couple of things where you were like, I don't know what he was really saying there. What was that guy doing in that movie? What was that about? I thought the whole movie was like that. Now, granted, I often have things go over my head because I want something more straightforward. But I only assume that Coppola knew what he was wanted because he's a great director and he's done it so many times before. And I don't think there's evidence that he's like senile or anything. I think we got the movie he wanted us to see. I don't think anybody knows what it's about except maybe him. And I really don't like those kinds of movies. He's not the only filmmaker that does that. Uh, Oftentimes David Lynch strikes me as that kind of person where the only person on the planet who knows what the hell his movies are about is David Lynch. And I'm good for him. I'm glad he gets to make his movies. So in the case of Megalopolis, I'm very much in favor of it existing. Can't say I'm sorry I saw it because, there are worse movies. And it was only 2 and 18 or 2 and 20, whatever. It wasn't 4 hours long.
It wasn't 4 hours long.
Well, you saw it twice.
Oh,
That's why it's long for you.
no,
You
it's
saw it 2 times.
seeing it twice,
Um,
8 hours long. Anyway,
and I guess I would add one last thing for this specific one, which was uh, it's clearly designed. It's a big screen extravaganza picture, and I didn't care. Um, it's like there's times when I'm so glad I'm watching the movie in a theater, and that seems like the kind of movie that should be true for. He makes a big movie, but I didn't care because I didn't really care about the movie. I didn't know what the heck it was about. I didn't know what he was doing with all the stuff. So, and that's why I don't think I'm alone, or you and I are alone. A lot of people think that movie's not very good, and too many of the positive things I've read about it are in that vein of, isn't it great that Coppola made this movie that goes against the market today? And that he had to pay for it himself because he's a great filmmaker and he deserves to make the movie he wants to make. All that is true, but it doesn't make a good movie, in my opinion. I can admire that effort, but when I go to the movie, I don't care. I want them to see a good movie, and I don't think that's a good movie.
I know I've encountered that defense of the film, and actually, I'm going to talk probably a little bit about that connection with the Joker. It'll make sense when I bring it up, but I mean, first of all, I know what I feel about Coppola at this point. Obviously, I revere the two godfathers in the conversation. I'm really not a huge admirer of Apocalypse Now. I was when I was younger, and parts of it are big, but it's a start to finish great film. I don't think it is. I like Dracula, but it's not one of my favorite films ever. I mean, I'm starting to question the premise that he is a great filmmaker. It sounds stupid. He's made three of the greatest American films ever. But I'm thinking, Fred Lynn had a couple of incredible seasons. But do we think of Fred Lynn as an all-time great baseball player? We don't. We think of him as a guy who had a couple of amazing seasons. Um, and the other thing that I'm starting, and here's where I'll talk about Adam Driver, that I'm starting to, and we've talked about this a lot, Steve, starting to think of the great directors of the 70s differently than I did 20, 30 years ago when, coming out of film school. And I was a film guy and probably sort of a version of an auteurist. I really think that so many of those great films, Godfathers, Nashville, on and on, have to do with performance and not necessarily. And obviously, the directors ultimately sign off on those performances and inspired many of those performances. But I think I go back to the conversation because of Gene Hackman and John Cazale. I go back to the Godfathers for 25 incredible performances. And at the center of this film, you've got Adam Driver, and I think he's terrible. And I don't know whether it's him or whether Coppola is saying, this is the way I want you to play the character. He's so lifeless and so different than the Adam Driver I like, especially, him clowning around inside Llewyn Davis singing that song about Kennedy, or in Black Klansman, he was very good. That when he breaks character 2 or 3 times in this film, it's so unexpected that it doesn't even work. I know when he's talking in the first scene with Natalie Emmanuel, where she comes to visit him. Did I say her name right? Yeah, and he wants her to go away. He says, "So why don't you go back to the club?" Like that, and the way he says that, and then when he arrives at one of these whatever busy events, decadent events, and some news guy sticks a microphone in his mouth, he says, "Should we be worried?" He said, "You should be very, very worried. Run, run." And he breaks character. And it's just, I wish the whole character had been conceived like that, with some nuance and moments of, lightness. But when those are the only 2, 3 times in the film, the rest of the time, he's just this deadly dull visionary, and he's playing that to the hilt, and everything's interior. It's a terrible performance. In the 3 great Coppola films, he just would not have let that happen. He cared about every single minor role in those films. And this one, he lets the single most important role of the film be given over to a bad performance. That's my biggest.
I would just emphasize, because you're right, and I love actors, but we always have to remember there's a director directing the actors. Adam Driver, I like his adventurousness. He plays a lot of different kind of characters, and that doesn't always succeed. But when he's good, he's good. Coppola has proven that he can get great performances from actors. So I'm thinking it's not unless again maybe he's just feeble-minded now, but I don't think he is. I think what we see out of Adam Driver in that movie is what Coppola wanted Adam Driver to give us. I don't think it's Coppola was slipping that day. I think he had a long time to plan this movie. I think that's what he wanted it to be.
I know. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt,
but that doesn't make it a good performance. I agree with you. It's just another example of how I pat Coppola on the back and still would wish I'd never see that again. That movie.
I think you're right. I think that's how he wanted him to play it, and that is concerning, to say the least. I jotted down some of the many film references, the most obvious ones. I know that, for the 5 or 6 I have, there's 20 or 30 more. Obviously, Hitchcock, the very first scene when he stares down, it's sort of vertigo, and then at some point you have Hitchcock shows up in a headline. I think when they're talking about, they've got this newspaper collage of when he supposedly murdered his wife. Hitchcock's in one of the headlines. There's the obvious nod to Night of the Hunter when we see his wife in a flashback, dream sequence, floating underwater and her hair spread out like Shelley Winters in Night of the Hunter. Um, Almost too obvious to mention the chariot race and Ben-Hur. One that I'm going to say might be an intentional reference, but I might be reaching here. Oh, who is he speaking to? Adam Driver at one point. Somebody comes to visit him and says something that he finds incredibly distasteful, and he gives a one word response. He says, "Wow," and walks away. I thought that might be a reference to Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront. When Charlie pulls the gun on him, Kale makes mention of this moment, or maybe Stanley Kaufman does, where he just says, shakes his head. He says, "Wow," pushes the gun away. Safety last, Harold Lloyd, some of the stuff with standing on the clock. And the last thing, at one point, I think a logo shows up. I can't even remember the context, but it's clearly meant to be the RKO logo, which, is immediately brings to mind Citizen Kane. And I'm sure there are lots more. And that was sort of interesting, but at the same time, I don't know. It's just not enough for me. I much prefer the way Godard handled film history, and it was kind of, at times, it's incomprehensible too. But in his history of film, however that's rendered in French, I felt that there was just more of a controlling vision, if you want to call that, instead of just I'm Francis Coppola and I hate the way films are today, so I'm going to work in all these references to film when it was great. I don't have anything to add. I'm just picking out the references here. Anything to say on that, or should I move on to my final points here?
No, I'm
Okay, questions I have. I'll leave you to answer these.
okay.
First of all, who or what is this film about? I did mention, I think that very specifically, we haven't mentioned, again, we've joked about this. I call him Sleepy LaBeef, Shia LaBeef, or whatever.
The buff.
Yeah. I think that he is meant to be, and this is maybe the most obvious thing in the world to say, but I think it's in there somewhere. He's meant to be kind of a Trump character. At one or two points, he's rallying all these, people basically saying, you're the dregs of society, and we need to band together and basically take over. I think he's meant to be Trump. Someone else said no, John Boyd's meant to be Trump, but I think Trump's in there somewhere. Is it about Trump? Is it about Coppola? Is he Adam Driver? I think there's some obvious truth to that. Coppola's always, Kale wrote it. I think when One from the Heart came out, Kale said Coppola had a major chip on his shoulder, and that's still there. Is it about the whole film's about the film industry, someone taking on the film industry? Is it about big tech? I don't know. What's it about? What is this film about?
One of the reasons I don't like it is I don't think it's about anything. You could ask him; he probably could tell you what it's about. I think I wrote that he clearly had a great plan and he had great vision. I don't deny that. I don't have the slightest idea what it was, and I don't know what the movie was about, and I don't know what the characters were about, and that's not my fault. Okay, if there's a complicated plot, sometimes I miss it. That's on me. But if a whole movie is incoherent, it doesn't matter to me if he knew what it was about. I could tell it was great. Great. I'm glad it was great. But I think the answer to your question is it's not about anything that we're ever going to figure out. Someday, in 15 years, somebody's going to write their PhD diss on that movie. But until then, there's got to be something else to think about.
The other thing is, if you take 40 years to make a film, I just read the most recent book on Coppola, Sam Lawson's book. And it starts with Megalopolis, him working on it like the early 80s. If you take 40 years to make a film, then it was probably about 40 different things at different points. I mean, he didn't start if Donald Trump is in there in 2024, Donald Trump wasn't in there in
Yeah,
1982.
yeah.
And I'm sure in 1990 it meant something to him and something else in 2005. And that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing. Second question, and you've already spoken to this, that Coppola, that film critics have said he has every right to, do what he wants. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But it's not like him thumbing his nose at a studio. This is his money. What kind of return did he expect on his investment of time and money? I mean, he must have known that this was by and large not going to do well with critics, and he must have known that it was not going to be a financial windfall. What does he want out of this? I'm just curious. And again, it's
He's an
up to him,
artist. He
whatever
wanted.
he wants out of it.
He had to make it.
I guess so.
It was inside him. He had to get it out. He's a
Did he
film
have to
collector. That's
make
what
it?
he does.
But what's the term for that? There's a term for it where you're so far along you can't bail. Did he have to
Yeah.
make it only because, okay, I can't stop now. I just got to get it done. I don't care what I play.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not inside his head, but no, I
Yeah.
think he wanted to make it. He could make it because he had a winery that made a lot of money.
Hmm.
He was able to get it out there because he still has a reputation that people will pay attention, even if they don't like what they see. He was able, for those reasons, to get that movie out there, and it mattered to him. It was important to him. It was personal to him. I don't have any question of why it's out there, you
Okay.
know. And I wonder if he thought, oh, people probably won't like this, and if he cared, even if people won't like this, um, because his reputation was built originally on not just great movies but great popular successes. The
Right.
Godfathers, those were not just great movies; they were great popular successes that are still part of the culture. So he knows how that goes. He knows what it can mean. He also knows that he hasn't been in that area sort of his movies for ever since Apocalypse Now, which with that one and with Godfather 3, he just kind of keeps making them every few years, puts them back out there again to remind us that he had a lock on that culture. I don't think he has it anymore, at least not in this movie, but maybe he didn't care. I don't know.
I
I
know.
don't. I think he's happy to make that movie, whatever.
I'm just throwing these questions out there. It's just things I've been puzzling over. And I definitely one of the not the necessarily defenses of the film, but has drawn praise just at the level to make a film at that age is an accomplishment. How old is he now? 83 to make one so large. And I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, there's a reason you don't have to. It doesn't have to be ageist to note that most directors, it's the kind of job that it's hard to do when you get really old and you get tired because it's so much work. So you wouldn't maybe have the energy to do stuff. So even the greatest of filmmakers, if they made it to 80s, uh, you know, Renoir's best movies were still back in the 30s or whatever.
Right.
I don't count Clint Eastwood as a great filmmaker, so I guess that he don't count. And now you see he's got a new movie coming out. I just saw previews for it, but uh, it's a hard thing to do. Making a movie is hard, or directing a movie is hard, just for starters. Uh,
Um,
and so
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that I'm going to go see a movie just because the director was 83 years old. I'm going to say, okay, I'll see it or not, but I won't. That won't be the reason.
Oh, I know. I
I
don't. I don't give participation points either. I mean, I want to see a good film.
Yeah.
I have just enough time, Stephen, 4 minutes to ask my last question, which is the one question we have to ask for this film, Francis Ford Coppola film. What would Pauline Kael have thought?
I mean, I
Yeah,
think she hated that.
yeah, she
I mean,
turned on him pretty early.
I may be reflecting on it. When I wrote about it, I noted that the local paper in San Francisco, it started with the main film critic who was just going on vacation. So he said, "This is the film of the year because it's a Coppola movie. It's going to be great. It doesn't matter if it's good." Then it came out, and the main review was, "Well, you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not, but you should see it because it's important." Then a guy who's not the main film critic wrote a review, and I got to thank the headline writer. The headline was, "Don't see Megalopolis as a piece of shit," with a line too high. And there were all these were in the same newspaper. And then finally, the first guy, the main guy, he came back finally and saw it because he hadn't seen it before, and he liked it. So I guess there's a thing of that. What would Kale think? I mean, I have a hard time sometimes thinking what she would think when I really means what I would think. But she stuck with directors, but she didn't necessarily stick with him. You know, she liked some of it. She didn't like some of it. I think she'd recognize it as a flop. She might go a little bit with that honorable attempt kind of feeling.
I
She might
think
do that.
I think a review of one from the heart would probably be a good starting point for what she might think of this. Um, I will. I also wonder what she did. She actually liked Talia Shire in the Third Godfather. I thought Talia Shire was an embarrassment in the Third Godfather, and she's still doing the same character in Megalopolis. Maybe she would have found something nice to say about Talia Shire or even Dustin Hoffman. Who knows? She could get very quirky about bad movies and pick out something that really you like that. Anyway, I think we're
It's
going to
no
have
eyes of Laura Mars.
is of Laura Mars. That's right. I think we'll probably have to start a second Zoom. Steve. Well, I know we will,
Okay.
unless we can get rid of Joker 2 in 1 minute and 10 seconds. So let's
I
take 10
wish.
minutes and I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Talk to you then.